I'm just wondering how you've seen the Israeli lobby develop with respect to American policy since you wrote that book, and how it's facilitating the ongoing assault or genocide on Gaza right now.
Well, there's no question that the Israel lobby is playing a key role in keeping the West on Israel's side. No doubt about that. We wrote the article, Steve Walt and I, about the Israel lobby in 2006, and then we wrote the book in 2007. So that was quite a while ago, a good 18 years for the article. I think there's no question that we have had a profound effect as a result of the article and the book on the discourse about Israel. I think we opened up a big discussion or a widespread discussion on the Israel lobby, the U.S.-Israeli relationship, and on Israeli policy itself. But I think we have had zero effect on actual policy, right? So again, we've influenced the discourse for sure, but in terms of actual policy, zero influence. And I think that tells you two things. One is the lobby is incredibly powerful. And number two, I would argue that the lobby has become more powerful with the passage of time. I think what's happened here is that it has become increasingly difficult to defend Israel in public discourse in the West. I think Israeli behavior is so outrageous on occasion that the lobby has to work overtime to defend Israel. And I think it's fair to say that the lobby has risen to the occasion. It's gotten stronger with the passage of time, and it does an amazing job of protecting Israel. I want to be clear here. I do not think this is in the American national interest, and I don't think it's in Israel's interest as well. I think that the lobby, in effect.
All right, there's more on that, where more from that, where it came from. I also went through a Mearsheimer speech this week that was an hour and a half. He does talk about Iran in that as well, and the planning of the attack, coordination with the United States. But I wanted real quick to introduce you to his book. As he mentioned, The Israel Lobby and U.S. Foreign Policy was written in 2007. It started with an article. His co-author, Stephen Walt, is from Harvard University. Mearsheimer teaches at the University of Chicago, which is Rockefeller's chosen university of sponsorship. So you just learned from a highfalutin American Ivy League style, because University of Chicago, it fits in with those, but it's not technically Ivy League. High quality professor level understanding of the situation. He used words like apartheid and ethnic cleansing and other words that are not in the New York Times style guide for this situation. So it was a controversial book back then. If people only realize now what he gave you a roadmap to, I think they'd be buying more of these copies. So let me give you an example of what he left us. 2007, we're going to go to page 60 and 61. This is Israel and the United States getting together, real close, tight bond situation after 9/11, almost like Stockholm Syndrome, where you get a bond with your attacker. But so they're talking about the playing of Judeo-Christian values, and that ending the Palestine-Israel conflict and making the U.S. support for Israel more selective or conditional would not help. And so we're going to go all in, and I'm going to give you a quote from page 61. Let's see, I need to make it just a little bit higher so I can zoom in, but still get the whole page for you. Is that going to work? All right, doing it live. Washington should not press Israel to make concessions such as dismantling settlements in the West Bank and the occupied territories until all Palestinian terrorists are imprisoned, repentant, or dead. Instead, the United States should continue to provide Israel with extensive support and use its own power and resources to go after countries like the Islamic Republic of Iran, Saddam Hussein's Iraq, Bashar al-Assad's Syria, and other countries believed to be supporting terrorists. Now, conveniently, these are all Arab neighbors of Israel. Just want to point that out. Instead of seeing Israel as a major source of America's troubled relationship with the Arab and Islamic world, this new rationale portrays Israel as a key ally in the global war on terror. Why? Because its enemies are said to be America's enemies, which is funny because we're all the way across the ocean. And we were founded with like Monroe Doctrine, not to infringe on the stuff that goes on in Europe and Asia. As Ariel Sharon, former Israeli prime minister, put it during a visit to the United States in late 2001 after the horrific attacks on the World Trade Center and Pentagon, he said, quote, "You in America are in a war against terror. We in Israel are in a war against terror. It's the same war." I want to point out that Ehud Barak, former prime minister of Israel, also said the same thing, but on the morning of 9/11, I'm pretty sure we played that clip last week. According to senior official in the Bush administration, quote, Sharon played the president like a violin. I'm fighting your war. Terrorism is terrorism, and so on. Former Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu told the United States Senate in 2002, quote, "If we do not immediately shut down the terror factories where Arafat is producing human bombs, it is only a matter of time before suicide bombers will terrorize your cities. If not destroyed, this madness will strike in your buses, in your supermarkets, in your pizza parlors, in your cafes." Netanyahu also published an op-ed in the Chicago Sun-Times declaring, quote, "No grievance, real or imagined, can ever justify terror." Isn't that how the state of Israel was born? King David Hotel, July 22nd, 1946? I'm asking for a friend because that's a dangerous question. American power topples the Taliban regime in Afghanistan, and the Al-Qaeda network there crumbles on its own. Ehud Barak, former prime minister, op-ed Times of London. The world's governments know exactly who the terrorists are and exactly which rogue states promote their activity. Yeah, the ones without central banks. And I'm talking to the country that was founded by international bankers. Countries like Iran, Iraq, Libya, Sudan, North Korea, right? None of those have a central bank, to my recollection, have a proven track record of sponsoring terrorism, while no one needs reminding of the carnage wrought by the terrorist thugs of Hamas, Hezbollah, Islamic Jihad, and even Yasser Arafat's own PLO. Well, they took care of that with some polonium in 2005. They killed him. Our countries do not just share the experience and pain of terrorism. We share the commitment and resolve to confront the brutal terrorists that took these innocent people from us. Well, it's interesting. Now, there are also sections in this book like Iran in the crosshairs, which might be relevant to current events. And then there's some other talk about the Palestinian problem and Hamas. But it ties into the neocons, which had a plan before 9/11 and after the Israeli clean break strategy to bring back some terrorism, Pearl Harbor type events, and to use this guy called Osama bin Laden. But this isn't from 2002. This is from 1998. And this is a group of people that are part of the Anglo-American establishment put into this country to have influence on the geopolitical objectives and agendas of our country. And so when you see two articles, same issue, that follow on with the clean break strategy, and you discover that these people are called neoconservatives and that basically they're the American Likud party, then you start to see why they all of a sudden have terrorism all in common and why their war is all of a sudden our war, et cetera, et cetera. So with all that being said, Scott, was there anything in there that you didn't glean prior to those clips?
Oh, man. Yeah. Well, first of all, great presentation. You know, it's really interesting. In that clip, he mentioned, he was asked something to the effect of like, do you feel like anything's changed? And he said something like, I don't feel like much has changed. You know, I don't know if like me writing this book has really done anything. And maybe it wasn't necessarily the book that caused the change, but, you know, I would refer back to last week's episode. You played that Macklemore song where he's rapping about AIPAC. And
AIPAC and Kofi, those were good lyrics.
Yeah, I know, but it's like, and then actually Owen Benjamin had a funny skit a few weeks ago, or it was a few months ago at this point, where he was like a skit. He was talking to his psyop, like it was like his stockbroker, his like psyop stockbroker, and he's like, all right, we're going long on this psyop and conspiracy. We're going long on this one. All right, we're selling anti-Semitism. We're out. He's like, dude, soccer moms are talking about APAC, man. It's over. It's at its peak right now. We're getting out. We're getting out. Because he's been calling out APAC and all this stuff for like a long
Yeah,
time in a
for a
comedic
long
way,
time.
in a
Yeah.
comedic way. You know what I mean? And it's like, but it's like, now that it's trickled to the surface, and it's like, yeah, they're making rap songs, and it's just like soccer moms are talking about APAC, dude. It's like, whoa. I would say like there's a lot of awareness around this, which is so interesting, man. It's so interesting. That's the part of the piece of the puzzle that I can't quite figure out. It's like, why would they? I think we've talked about this briefly on the show at one point, but it was like, why is Israel just like balls to the wall? They don't care the outcome. They don't care if they're the pariah of the international community, but as long as they're still on good graces with the United States, I guess he made that point. That's really the only thing that matters. But even still, like, at what point are they going to lose that? I mean, there has to be like some line. But again, you can look at APAC. You can look at how, like, you can just go to like the open secrets, and you can see the amount of payments that are being made from APAC, which is the American Israeli Public Affairs Committee, to both sides, Republicans and Democrats, across the aisle. And I've heard Owen Schroyer on Infowars does this really funny bit these days where he, plays all these clips of a politician who's just like kind of overly cringily, just gleaning all over Israel and just completely ignoring the facts of the genocide or anything, and just being so kind of just cringe about it. And he's like, all right, I wonder how much they're getting from APAC. Let's take a look here. Oh, yep, it's like $370,000. You know what I mean? It's like every single time. So it's like they're beholden to the lobbying groups. I'm sure APAC isn't the only one, but it's like, when you're in that situation, particularly around the question of Israel or Zionism, it's like it creates this kind of interesting situation where it's like you can't, like, are you in Congress like representing America, or are you representing Israel? And you can almost make the argument that when you're beholden to an organization like APAC, it's like you're like when push comes to shove, you're gonna always defer to the interests of APAC and Israel. Like in this particular situation, like American
and blackmail.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So between they got the lobbyists put pressure, and then Whitney Webb's 2 volumes. It's all about the state of Israel's blackmail program and espionage, and Robert Maxwell and Epstein and all the other things that come with that. So there's a lot there for people to unpack, because where mainstream media drops you off, there's a big chasm. And in order to bridge that gap, you need to find, like, what are the pieces that they took away? There used to be a bridge there. There used to be understanding, and what did they have to take away to create that gap? And that's why, like, Whitney has 2 volumes, because they took away a lot. They took a lot, it takes a while to, it takes many words to put it back in place so you can actually understand what's going on. And the situations that were alluded to by Benjamin Friedman, first off, I highly recommend listen to the whole thing. He goes in there, he makes some really good points. For instance, one of those points around, 52 minutes, he talked about the Kol Nidre oath, which is very interesting, yearly absolution for any sins or lying, and it gives you kind of permission to tell untruths to people not in your group. It's interesting. I think it was in the year 1345, he goes into this part. 1345, Wycliffe made this, he did a translation of the Bible in England, and then the word Jewish or Jews was invented. So it's invented. It starts out as GYU, GIU, IU, IUW, IEUU. He went through this whole list before it gets to IEW, then JEW, because there's no J in Latin. So to have that word in Latin or Greek or Aramaic was very difficult, right? There were Judeans, but they needed to have, so the word that's so tightly related to anti-Semitism, it wasn't even a word in the English language until, I think the 16th century, 1600s is when it came into a vernacular. Prior to that, how do you even identify that group in history to look them up? Which is another interesting aspect, because, not that it doesn't happen if you study the kings of Britain. If you go back far enough, it's like, it's a little ambiguous back in the 700s and 900s, right? But there's some gaps. So anyway, Benjamin Friedman, very smart guy. He was at the Versailles Conference. He was with the Zionist contingent of negotiators, and he gives you some insights. But his points about Palestine, you'd say, well, he was wrong. America never put boots on the ground over there. And I'd say, that's right. He was wrong. Thankfully, he was wrong. But right now, we just built a military pier. We just spent $300 million in 3 months Do you think it's just so we can drop off Happy Meals? Or do you think when the military builds stuff like that, they might want to do some military stuff? And we already played Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin last week, and he said, our guys, of course, are going to be armed because they're soldiers. And if they get shot at, they're going to return fire. Well, the pier was already under attack while they were building it. So I just see it as an invitation for, American kids to be put over there in that situation, to deal with a situation that, America could have dealt with it by prosecuting Nelson Rockefeller for his Nazi funding war crimes. Then we wouldn't have this situation. You could have done it by prosecuting Israel for USS Liberty and say, you can't take Gaza and the West Bank, give them back to those countries. But that didn't happen. That's probably because of the Israel lobby back then, right? If you look in the 60s, why would there be a cover up? How could America let its soldiers, like you just saw, like Israel retaliating against Iran because they did some stuff. America's ship, soldiers, intelligence, like they had to scuttle all their intel. They throw all the stuff over the sides. That was the goal. If that ship came under attack any more than it did, the protocol is those NSA guys, they pull their drives out, they put them in these bags with weights, and they throw them over the side. There were Russian subs right near USS Liberty working with the Israelis to be like, hey, we're going to make these guys throw their stuff off. Do you want to pick it up? Luckily that didn't happen. But that could also change the reflection on the future of a nation state like America. So I think we have amazing resourcefulness in this country, amazing people, but we also have a responsibility, because the only way that we are involved in that little nation state democracy in the Middle East is because of things they can't tell you about. That's it. It's not what they're telling you. It's like, it's not Christian Zionism. That's not why it's all rah-rah. So there's a layer of power that they're not willing to let you see into, and that drives that relationship. And people are like, why is America so like this? Why are all our governors over at the Wailing Wall, even if they're not, studying Hebrew? What's up with that? It's a power thing. It's a kiss my ring, or in this case, kiss my wall type of thing. Whereas, as Flo used to say, kiss my grits. But you'd have to be pretty old to get that joke. All right, so our next block. It is funny if you get it. Next block, I want to tell you about this place in Israel called the West Bank, because it's not Palestine, it's not Hamas, and it is being colonized. People are being stolen in the night. And when you see what they're doing for the ethnic cleansing, I'm just going to tell you up front, these clips are together because in one, they're going to show you how they settle and they plant all these pine trees. And then you're going to find out the pine trees are on the old Palestinian towns. They turned them into national parks. You can never go back. Here's trees. You don't even know where your street was anymore. And the pine trees are super flammable, and they mess with all the indigenous Palestine. So this block is made because there's elements of information in each one. I need you, the audience, to do some addition. Take this fact plus this fact, and you see, oh, geez, that's on purpose. That's really creatively cruel, on par with like Final Solution type stuff. This is the eradication of a people who are the indigenous owners of the land. They didn't move there from Europe, and they don't have, I don't know. Anyway, let's go to these clips before I give away the gist of the clips and we don't have to play them.
You've probably heard of the Israeli settlements, the settler movement, and the presence of these settlements in the occupied Palestinian territories. But how much do you actually know about it? Let's explore the settler movement and their activities a bit further. Since I'll mostly be talking about the settlers and settlement movement in the West Bank, I think it's important to first understand the geography and history of the West Bank itself. Now, the West Bank is the largest Palestinian territory, and the second territory, of course, is Gaza, where a war is going on right now. Now, if you look at the map, the red area is what is the West Bank, and the reason it's called the West Bank is because it's west of River Jordan. Where the red boundary ends towards the west is the state of Israel, And the West Bank was occupied by Jordan in 1948 war, and it remained an occupied part of Jordan until 1967. After the Six-Day War of 1967, Israel captured the West Bank, and it has since then been under Israeli occupation. It has a total area of 2,183 square miles. These are roughly just the broad details about the West Bank, but the most important thing to keep in mind is that for any future two-state solution, the West Bank is supposed to be the main Palestinian territory.
What makes the Grand Theft World podcast unique, invigorating, exciting, and informative? Most other podcasts out there are either doing straight up interviews or they're just covering the daily news. They're covering current events from the day they happened. And that is effective. It's useful. It's a great starting point. And then sometimes these current events change during the week past the first story. So we like to give it a little time. You have to wait till some of the dust settles on these stories in order to give them accurate coverage. And the other thing that's really missing in the media landscape is covering the articles that are coming out every day. That's great. That's necessary. But who's bringing in contextual history so that you can understand what has been going on for decades and decades to lead up to the machinations and actions that we see unfolding today? So what we do here on the podcast is we cover current events. Many of these things are censored, but we wait about a week. As a forensic historian, I focused mainly through my career on the history of globalism and collectivism and things that they call maybe the New World Order. There's a lot of facts to these sort of circumstances, groups, events, activities, working groups that they've had over time. So for Grand Theft World listeners, we not only break down the current events, most of which that are censored during the week, we provide you with contextual history, we give you the source notes, the references, we do deep dives, and this really empowers you with an understanding of context and history so that you can make more informed decisions in your life. There's also a community, a membership where you guys can actually ask questions and we can get into the show and we can share evidence. And there's a town hall weekly for Grand Theft World for those who listen to it and are interested in covering the stories that we don't get to during a 6-hour show. Listening to it an hour a day, you could easily consume the week's news, but you're going to have substance and meaning and context and understanding. And with that, you can make higher quality decisions in your life. So if you're interested in more quality in your life, go to grandtheftworld.com, click podcast at the top, and we'll see you there. Thank you.
These allegations are false.
This isn't Grand Theft Auto, folks. This isn't a video game.
What are the most surprising things that you discovered once you started pulling on that thread? Who he was connected to, what institutions he was influential over, what events he participated in?
Come on, man. What are we talking about? Come on, man. No.
You don't have to think about it, dude.
I got this quote because you said you didn't know much about Klaus Schwab. I made it my job to, as soon as this happened, I'm like, okay, this guy's their front man. Let me learn about the official history of the World Economic Forum. I got their 40-year history. I got every book that Klaus Schwab has written or ghostwritten. I went through those books. This is one of the most interesting passages.
Come on, man. Come on.